Everyone has a story.
Pretty crazy evening. Hustle and see the fire that has fallen.
We all take a different path and face different hurdles. I'm your host, Sarah Strackhouse, and in this show, I get to interview inspiring women who are dedicated to making change.
The world is tough, so be tough.
Welcome to the Strackhouse. Yes, well, welcome to our house where we can really peel back the layers and tell your story and hope you leave feeling inspired. We're so excited to tell today's story. It's Jo Alch, who is the CEO and founder of Acapella In-Home Care, as well as the founder and executive director of Pajamas for Seniors. She's also the host of The Lemon Tree, as well as the author of The Lemon Tree. But I really want to tell her story because it really embodies what the show is all about. She had a tough upbringing, which didn't stop her from becoming not only successful in life, but also in her career. Jo, thank you so much for joining us.
I am honored. Thank you so much, Sarah.
Yeah, of course. Well, first, I want to ask you, tell me a little bit about The Lemon Tree. And here is the book here, as well as your podcast. Tell us a little bit about what The Lemon Tree means.
Well, the Lemon Tree was a little shop that was in uptown New Orleans where I grew up. It was the most wonderful little gift shop. It was one of the newer gift shops in its time. It was in the late 60s, early 70s. This gentleman came to New Orleans from New York, started this store called the Lemon Tree. It sold candles and incense and little gifts and knickknacks and picture frames. And I would go visit the store and just loved it. And so it was kind of my home away from home. It was kind of my heaven on earth, honestly.
Yeah. And I know that from watching your podcast and reading through your book, you kind of needed that home away from home. Tell us a little bit about your upbringing and your parents. I know it was a little bit dysfunctional there.
I grew up in a very strict Southern Baptist home. We were on the second row of the church. In the church service, never missed a beat. We were at the church every time the doors were open, but people did not know. My parents had a horrible marriage. They were both unfaithful to each other. There was alcoholism and really failure to be parents. My mother did not have the mothering gene. She was a singer. She felt that she should have been a backup singer to, Barbra Streisand, and she should have had that part in My Fair Lady. So she resented having children. It was almost an arranged marriage. My grandparents on both sides wanted my parents to marry the perfect Southern Baptist spouse, and so they got married, miserable together. And my mother just did not want to be a mother. She did not want us around. And so if we weren't at school, we had to be outside, or we were sent to our grandparents' house. And my father's parents lived about a mile away.
Right.
We were at their home every weekend, and they were very, very strict and very cruel.
Yeah. And I know that reading through your book, I saw you kind of lived in Dallas, and your maternal grandparents you loved, Honey and Bear. And then you guys moved to Tampa and then to New Orleans. And tell me a little bit about where, like you said, you spent weekends with your grandparents. Tell me a little bit about Grandmother Maud.
Grandmother Maud was mean.
Yeah.
She was a World War II nurse, charity nurse. She was from a large family, left home to become a nurse. She was the only child in 10 children, I think, that got to go to college.
Wow.
And she wound up becoming a nurse. She was very stern and very strict. She believed that children should not be children. She did not believe in toys at her house, bikes at her house. We were not allowed to play. We had to learn to cook and clean. We learned to iron linens with precision. We had to learn at 4 and 6 years old how to make beds, hospital cornered sheet beds.
Right.
We had to polish silver. So while all of our friends were playing with Barbie dolls and playing outside, we were learning to be housekeepers, basically. And she was, not only was she mean, she had a different persona at church. Everyone loved her. She was the pillar of the church. Unfortunately, she was a pedophile. And she was very cruel. And I knew from the first weekend we stayed with her, and once we moved to New Orleans, by the first weekend we were there, we were at her house. We would see her on Friday. She'd pick us up from home, and we wouldn't see our parents again until Sunday after church. Wow. And she was a pedophile. She used the fact that she was a nurse to justify her behavior. Wow. But I always knew, even at 6 years old, there is something wrong with this woman. And as a child, I was not allowed to speak up. My parents, it wasn't a relationship, a normal relationship with parents, and I was terrified of my father. I couldn't say anything to my mother. And when I did, I was about 6 or 7, and I said to my mother, grandmother is not, I told her what she was doing, and my mother laughed it off and said, grandmothers are supposed to do that. She didn't even take the time to listen nor care. So I would, when I was home, I would go to the Lemon Tree after school. She didn't care where we were after school. I would take the streetcar. I'd go all over New Orleans. My sister and I remember we were like 6 and 8. We would take the streetcar to, say we didn't have school because of bad weather. Yeah. We'd take the streetcar to the French Quarter and walk through the French Quarter.
Wow.
And it was just, she didn't care what we did. She never even asked when we got home, what'd you do today?
Right. So it was either you were roaming the streets or at your grandmother's house. Cruel grandmother. Wow.
Right. And so so I kind of had 3 lives. I had my home life, I had my life at my grandmother's, and then I had my life at the Lemon Tree. And the Lemon Tree, I never wanted to get in trouble. I was always worried I was going to get in trouble. And my grandmother she felt the best form of praise was criticism. And she felt that was how to mold a woman to be a godly woman, was just criticism. And so the only time I got that affection and love, and even if it was a scent, just taking in a scent, I felt God's love. And the verses we learned at church and the prayers we'd have before meals, they never meant anything to me until I'd go to the Lemon Tree and okay, well, this is what heaven is supposed to be like. Yeah. And this is how we're supposed to feel when we pray. And so I'm so grateful that I had that. Even if it was a 5-minute visit after school, it was enough to keep me going.
Yeah, like you said, it was your safe haven. Well, tell me a little bit about, even you said at even 6 and 7, you knew that it was wrong. At what point did you, and I know because I read your book, but tell us a little bit about at what point you said something and you said, this is it. Tell us a little bit about that.
And my grandmother, from when I was 6, my sister was 8, my brother was 4. She had a bath time routine for all of us. And it was so uncomfortable. But my brother and sister and I never spoke about it until her funeral, which is so crazy. We never spoke to each other about it. It was so embarrassing and so shameful.
But I that's interesting to me because I know how close you and Hope were.
We were, and my brother too. He's like my best friend. I talk to him every day.
Little Gilly, right?
Gilly, and we were all just. It was so. You think about like Elizabeth Smart. Not being able to scream and grab somebody and say, hey, I'm the one that's on the news. You're so terrified. You're in this fight or flight. You can't think, okay, I know what she's doing is wrong, and I'm going to run home and I'm going to find a police officer. Your brain as a child doesn't register that way. You think, okay, I'm just going to survive this. And I remember I would just count, and I would tighten my fists and and my grandmother would say, oh, don't be a smart aleck. She would say that. Stop being a smart aleck. But I was about 10 or 11, and she was distracted at my bath time one day, and I was just like, I'm not going to let her do this anymore. So she had a rule in her house. There were no locks on the doors. She could come in and do whatever she wanted to do. And so I couldn't lock the bathroom door because there wasn't a lock. But we couldn't close the shower curtain. There was a shower curtain. The bathroom was real tiny. So I remember I grabbed towels and I got in the bathtub and covered myself completely with these towels. I closed the shower curtain and I waited for her to come in. And I knew, I did not know, I didn't know what sex was. I didn't know what pedophilia was. All I knew was what she was doing was not right.
Something clicked.
Something was not right. So she came in, I heard the door open, and she was rip-roaring mad when she came in because that shower curtain was closed. And she yanked that shower curtain open, and I said no. And just her face. She was so shocked. She didn't say a word. She just tiptoed out of the bathroom.
Wow.
And I closed the shower curtain, and it never happened again. And, talking to my brother and sister, they're like, yeah, it just stopped one day. But
Little did they know.
Yeah. So in whatever way the Lord used me to protect the three of us, and I was always considered the most outspoken. But in my... just as a business owner, and sometimes business owners, you have to make tough decisions, and I still struggle. Am I being too outspoken? I still struggle with things that I did from being a little girl just because of that upbringing,
But clearly not. Clearly you were not too outspoken. You were just you were.
Well, and I had to learn what is the difference between speaking up for yourself and being outspoken. And so that was hard. I learned it.
Yeah.
But it was hard.
Yeah. Something you also kind of talk about, and I think it was in your podcast, was some things to look out for if you see a child who might be in a situation, or maybe some symptoms. Can you talk a little bit about that? If someone thinks that might know someone who is going through something, either as a child or even as an adult, might be going through some sort of abuse or molestation or anything like that. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, and you know what? If you have a hunch and you have that sense of discernment, and ask God, we want to protect our children. In the Bible, we protect the little children. We honor our elders and the orphans. I always would look, like when I see a child, I know school started in our neighborhood at 8, and I see a child run into school with their backpack at 8:15, and I can see them walking down Coit Road.
Yeah.
I pray for them, and I'm like, you know what? There is something going on in that home. Yeah. But just, what are they eating? Ask them a simple question. What are you eating for breakfast? When I was 6, we were cooking our own breakfast. My mother wouldn't get up to fix us breakfast in the morning. Ask questions. What did you have to eat today? Look at their lunch. Yeah. Just their meals. I know in high school I had M&Ms. I would have M&Ms. I would scrounge together 41 cents because I could buy M&Ms from the cute boy that worked at the ag booth. He was in the 4-H club.
Right.
They sold candy. So look at those kind of things. What are they eating? What are they wearing? And you can be poor but in the most loving home on earth, but look for signs. Are they tired in class? Are they getting enough sleep? Are they eating right? Are they acting out? And for me, I would never act out because I knew I would get in trouble,
right?
And it wasn't like I was being beaten or anything, but it was the emotional abuse and spiritual abuse too. And people don't talk about that, but there is a lot of spiritual abuse in homes, a lot of religious homes, mine included,
right.
So just things like that. Like, are they alone? Are they, do they never want to go home? Are they always outside?
There's a couple common threads that are kind of throughout this story. The idea of image, how important that was to your parents and your grandparents and kind of what that brings. What does it, how have you kind of evolved that and kind of broken the mold here?
Well, I am really one of the most humble people you're going to meet. I'm transparent. What you see is what you get. And I'm so opposite of that. And so, I think the secret to my success is meet people where they are. And, everybody has a story. Everybody has a struggle. God allows those struggles. We don't want those struggles, but
Right.
He allows those struggles to mold us into what He wants us to be. And people
Yeah.
don't understand that, but He does. So you have to just take those struggles and grow from those struggles.
Well, what was the turning point where those struggles really turned into something fabulous? I know you've been married for 30 years, or probably more than that now. You have this incredible company, one of the largest in the southern part of America. Tell me a little bit about building a cappella in-home care and finding your husband, and kind of once you left your home, essentially.
Well, once I left my home, I did not have any support. And I just learned, if I want to make something of myself, I am not going to repeat that cycle. And so many people repeat cycles of poor behavior. I was not going to do it. I was going to be the one to make something, to break the cycle. And so, I worked.
That takes fortitude.
It does, and I was not going to fail. My dad never had any money. Every Friday he got paid. By Sunday he was out of money. I would never do that. One thing about Maud, she was a nurse, and she did believe in the act of service. And so she would take us to nursing homes. And one in particular that we went to all the time was called the Home for the Incurables. And it was the most pitiful nursing home. It was so horrible, and I just felt so sorry for those people that lived there. But we would go all the time and visit these women that were orphans. They were widows and orphans. They were wards of the state. They had no visitors at all. We'd go to this building, and beds would be lined up like a dozen in a row. All the sheets were white. The patients were in white. The nurses were in white. The walls were gray. It was just horrible. My grandmother showed us, there are people out there suffering. And, she really brought my brother and sister and I, all three, have such compassion for people in need. And that was one good quality of hers.
A little bit of silver lining.
It was that she did teach us how important it is to serve and give back. So when I was in nursing school, I went to Brookhaven Community College here in Dallas. I'm a proud alum. All of my instructors in nursing school told me, "Jo, you would make a great hospice nurse." So I wound up working at Parkland. Really didn't like Parkland, and it was hard work. And so I opened the phone book to hospices. Found a hospice that said family hospice. I thought, that sounds nice.
Yeah.
So I called them. They offered me a job. They had an opening, and just loved that one-on-one personal care, like those little ladies at the Home for the Incurables. And I was able to do that. Love working with seniors. But one thing I saw was these patients, a lot of these family members of hospice patients thought that hospice means you've got somebody with you around the clock for 6 months.
Right.
And you don't. And so people needed to pay for care to supplement what Medicare did with hospice. And so I really saw a need for exceptional caregivers that understood hospice. And so I started an agency. When I went to my boss to tell her I wanted to do my own agency, she told me, she said, "Jo, you are a wonderful nurse, but you don't know anything about business." And I was like, you know what? That's a little Maud comment.
Right.
And I'm not going to listen. We've been in business 13 years. We have over 400 employees. We've won numerous awards. One thing, D Magazine, I won Excellence in Nursing for Home Health, and that was such an honor. It's a wonderful magazine here in Dallas.
Yeah.
And, as a business owner, it's hard. And there were days when I first started my agency, I would want to just throw the sheets over my head and say, forget it. I'm going to go back to working hospice. But I'm like, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to fall on my face. I'm going to do it. I'm going to get back up. And in business, there are going to be successes. There are going to be failures. You learn from your mistakes. And have I made hundreds of mistakes? Yes. But you own them. You make a mistake. Oops, I'm sorry. I made a mistake. And you keep going.
Right. And you pray.
And you pray.
You pray. Well, that is another. Do want to piggyback off of that, because that is another thing that you talk about throughout your book is your belief in Christ, and how just that belief changed from, like you said, not being able to, not knowing that you could just talk to God or just pray whenever you wanted to really leaning on Him. And at one point, I remember you talk about being angry, at God, or versus being angry at the different people. Can you talk a little bit about how your journey changed and forgiveness, for Maud, for your family? I know that can't have been easy.
Well, and I called myself a church hopper for a long time. When my husband and I married, we wanted to raise our children in a Christian home, but I still had that image of church as, you've got to be perfect. Everybody at church is perfect. I'm the only one that's imperfect. And so I would join Bible studies. The kids would get in the children's program. Everything would be great until I would do something like, I've disappointed them. I'm not good enough at teaching.
They're seeing into me a little.
They're seeing me, and I don't measure up. And so and then we'd go to a different church. And we did this over the years, and it was my fault. It was my issue. But about 10 years ago, I went to a church, and there was a song the choir sang, and it was called No More Night. It's a song about forgiveness. It's a song about how God is always there, and that there's always going to be, He will redeem the day, and there is an ever after with Jesus Christ, and He's got us in the palm of His hands. Every word to the song, I heard the song, it was like that light bulb moment, and I'm like, okay, Lord, I surrender. I know you've got my back. You've had it all the time, and I have to forgive these people that have hurt me. And so it was really a song that changed my life.
Wow.
But I was at a point, as my business was growing and raising kids and becoming successful, I still had this, I'm not good enough. I won't ever measure up. And one day I really thought, you know what? If I just turn the wheel, I don't have to worry about any of this anymore. I don't have to worry about hurting people or making a mistake. And I realized I needed help.
Right.
And so I found this wonderful counselor, and it was totally a God thing. I just had to learn to accept them for who they were, and not try to fix a broken family that was unfixable.
Well, when did you actually decide to write your book and decide to start sharing your story publicly?
Well, it was when I was working with my psychologist. She told me to start journaling and writing things down, and so I did that. But my little Sunday school that I was in, they asked everybody, if you could share your testimony, could you do it? If somebody says, tell me how you became a Christian, or why you love the Lord so much. And our Sunday school teacher wanted us to be ready in case we had that one-on-one. And I was like, ooh, I wouldn't know what to say.
Yeah.
So he said, anybody that's interested, I want you to do a 10-minute testimony and come up and share it with the class. So everybody signed up for Sunday. I'm like, you know what? I can do this. I'm a contest. I can do this.
I'm competitive.
I'll take one for the team.
Yeah.
And so I shared my testimony, and there was not a dry eye in the class. And I'm like, wow, I guess I really do have a story to tell.
And I loved reading that in your book, just how raw and how real it is. Like I told you, I've been reading it since you gave it to me, and it's a page turner. And I was tearing up, and you just really bring the person to the moment, and the whole evolution of everything that happens. It's incredible. If people want to read your book and find out more about you, what is the best way to do that?
They can email me at info@thelemontreebook.com. We have a website. We have a Facebook page. We also have a podcast that is wonderful, and I have authors who have written stories of tremendous courage. It has been so interesting, the authors that I've found that have not stories like mine, they're different, but
Right.
they have endured such hardships and still come out strong. Everybody has a purpose.
Yeah.
And follow that purpose, and just keep going. You know, life is hard, and you're going to fall down, but get back up, and all things are possible.
Yeah. Well, just like you did, you really, from your tough beginnings to becoming the CEO of a really big company, your story is amazing, Jo. Thank you for sharing it.
Thank you so much.
Thanks
It was
for
an
coming
honor to
in.
be here.
Wonderful. Well, I will make sure to have the link of where to buy the book available. Thank you all so much for joining us. I hope you leave feeling inspired just like I am right now. Don't forget to subscribe, share, and like to the Strackhouse. We're on all social platforms. Thanks again for joining us. We'll see you next time. If you'd like to nominate an inspiring woman, email me at sarahstrackhouse@gmail.com. Thanks for joining. We'll see you next time.